All right, welcome everyone. This is a series that New Jersey Lawyers Assistants put together, and we call it Well-Being Wednesdays. As it turns out, due to some scheduling difficulties, we're going to be moving this to Tuesdays, so it would be more like a Tuesdays with Maury kind of situation. But these presentations are going to be very short, and they're going to take one little topic and try to give you enough information so that if you're interested in pursuing it more, you'll do that. Or if you're interested in pursuing it more, you can give us a call, and then we can, fill you in on more stuff and how to get more resources in this particular area. This will be the first one in the series, and it's going to be on the brain. And we're going to call it Your Brain in 30 Minutes. All right, so we're going to be sort of I was thinking this morning, and I was saying, well, what's another name for this? This could be like a TED double talk, but that's not a good term. So we'll talk about it as a double TED talk. Okay, 15 minutes they usually are. We're going to go for 30, and maybe a little more if I don't get through it, because again, this is the first time that we're doing this. All right. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to start off with a little word game, okay? And if you look here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 words. They all start with S, they all end in P, and I'm going to give you a clue, and quickly, and this has to be done very, very quickly. The brain has to work quickly to give these answers. You're going to tell me what the answer is. So first one, we go to the supermarket and okay. You give me something, I give you something, and okay. I'm not eating this food. This is nothing but, okay, we come to a green light, okay. So some of us said we come to a green light and we stop. No, we don't. We go, okay? We stop at red lights. But the point here is how the brain works. And the brain is a pattern recognition repeating machine. Okay, and remember that word patterns, because you're going to be hearing that a lot of times. So now in the space of maybe 5 to 10 seconds, I patterned your brain to get you to say stop at a green light. Right? And this is the way, as you move through life and you move through your environments, you start to develop these patterns. What kinds of patterns? Well, patterns of thinking, patterns of feeling, and patterns of behavior. Okay? And when you take all those things together, that's you. You are nothing more than patterns of feeling, thinking, and behaving. Right? Some of you may remember back in school when you were thinking, it was this guy named Rene Descartes. And he said, I think, therefore I am. But Rene was only 1/3 right. I think, I feel, and I act, therefore I am. Right? All three components. So we're going to look at the brain. We're going to look at the structure of the brain and use a teaching model here that is probably the best teaching model that I know of to do this in a way that you'll get the most benefit out of it. So this is called the triune brain, okay? Triune because it's divided into 3, the thinking brain, the verbal or emotional brain, and the pre-verbal brain. The reptilian brain is down here. So don't think of these things as clear demarcations or clear delineations, okay? Clear borders between these things. No, the brain works more like, you could say, an airport with hubs and connections going all over the place. But this model here, the triune brain, is the best one for teaching brain structures and how your brain operates. A lot of scientists still rely on it. More scientists are relying on the airport brain analogy. All right, so it's also called the evolutionary brain. It also has another name called the MacLean brain, because the guy by the name of MacLean came up with this idea. And it's based on this idea that the essence of a human being, okay, is thinking, feeling, and acting. Okay? Now, one of the handouts that you have is called You Are Your Brain, if you can pick that one. And I'll read it to you. By the way, anybody who wants copies of any of these things, you can just contact LAP, we'll get them for you. So you are your brain. The brain is the hardware of the soul. It is the hardware of your very essence as a human being. You cannot be who you really want to be unless your brain works right. You cannot enjoy well-being and wellness unless your brain works right. If your brain is not working well, you don't work well. How your brain works determines how happy you are, how effective you feel, how well you interact with others, your decision-making, your personality, your perception, your memory, learning, morality, and everything else we can associate with the mind are physical processes occurring in the brain. Your brain patterns help you or hurt you with spouse and significant others, parenting skills, work profession, religious beliefs, experience of pleasure and pain, anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive, proneness to anger, distraction, attentiveness. Behavior in your brain. Various parts of the brain influence behavior. Where are the trouble spots? What interventions can we use? We'll try to talk about some of those. In essence, then, we as human beings do three things. We think, we feel, and we act. Everything else is not really that relevant. That's how we move through the world. That's how we take up relationships. That's why we do all these things that are mentioned in this little article here about You Are Your Brain. Now, human behavior is characterized by repeating patterns. Remember, I said the brain is a pattern recognition repeating machine. Some of you may want to use the word habits better. We develop habits as we go along. Same thing, patterns. Patterns of approaches to things, patterns about how we think, we feel, and we act, right? And so, and how we react too, to things, how we react to our environment, how we, even down to small things, like how do we react with our coworker, okay, that we might have difficulty with, right? All of that is a function of the brain. Now, you'll hear the terms brain and mind, and they'll be used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing in the sense that brain is the physical organ. So we're going to talk about the physical organ, and we're talking about some of the structures that are there, right? So just like the lungs are the physical organ for your respiratory system, well, the brain is the physical organ that creates what? Mind. That's the difference between mind and brain. Mind is what the brain does. It creates mind. And what's mind? Mind is consciousness. Mind is thinking, feeling, and acting. That's what it is. So you can talk about things like, oh, that person has a beautiful mind, or that person has an evil mind. We're talking about a brain that's creating that kind of mind, and everybody's mind, in a sense, because we're all unique. And I'm going to read you something else about how we are unique, how we come to be unique, and it's through the brain, that we're all unique, so that every time you have a human being, you don't have the exact same person as other human beings. So that we're all unique. You know, that old snowflake idea? We're all like our own little snowflakes and stuff. And it's true, because between a combination of genes that you come into the world with, and then the different experiences you have in life, that's going to make you. So, and you know, some people who have bad experiences, how that changes their life. You know how people who have some good experience, how that changes their life, okay? So again, it's genes plus environment make who we are, and through the brain. What else was I going to say? Okay, these patterns, now, and this is important, these patterns are often pervasive. Note the words that are being used here: embedded, entrenched, ingrained, recalcitrant, and resistant to change over time. And that basically is just saying that once I develop a pattern or a habit, okay, all of us know how difficult it is to break, for example, a bad habit, right? Because this has now become patterned in the brain. And that pattern, okay, has to be broken. Okay, and if we have time, we'll get to how you break that pattern. And it's basically through acting differently, and it changes your feeling, and from there it changes your thinking. Okay, but we might not have time to do that. These mental, emotional, and behavioral patterns most often occur out of consciousness. So if you were, for example, to draw a line here, okay, this part of the brain, the thinking brain, we would call consciousness. Below that, this emotional brain, below that would be called unconscious. So there's two aspects to our brain and mind, conscious and unconscious. Okay, and hopefully we'll get to the little Sigmund Freud diagram that I put together. So that the unconscious, we may not be aware of why we're thinking, feeling, and behaving a certain way, believe it or not. We think we are. It's a hard thing to grasp. We think that we're in control. We think that we know, how to solve problems, but sometimes we're only operating in this brain and not aware of this brain. Hopefully I'll show you how that works. And the last thing I want to say, these mental, emotional, and behavior patterns work their way into our stress and coping styles and personalities. So knowing how your brain is structured and some of the functions of these structures can help you, okay, in many, many life situations. I'll just give you one example. I was counseling inmates, prison inmates, and what happened with one of my clients was that he got into a fight, okay? And then when I came in the next Monday, I said, Rodney, can I see you in the office? And he came in. I said, Rodney, what happened? Why'd you get into that fight? And this is what he said, because we had been through this. We had been through this entire chart with him. You know what he said to me? He said, Ramon, my amygdala got the best of me. And we're going to explain what that means. Keep that in mind. And I can't tell you how delighted I was that he had that insight, because now he's going to have that insight, okay, about something about his brain that he didn't know before. Okay. So we're going to start at the top here, and we're going to make believe we're Indiana Jones, and we're going to be archaeologists, and we're going to go on a dig all the way down, down, down to this first brain that we had. These other brains come later in evolution. So here we're at this level of brain, and this level of brain is made for one thing and one thing only: survival. All right. Now, if you can remember from high school biology, college biology, whatever, a word called the hypothalamus, right? Now, that hypothalamus has what's called an autonomic, means it works automatically, autonomic nervous system. And from that, that branches off into two separate systems, which is called the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And it's as easy as this. The sympathetic nervous system, because this is the way it works. As you go through your environment, your nervous system, and by the way, the body and the mind, okay, are not two different entities. And all the science is telling you it's one thing. It works together. So as you're going through your environment, you feel a sensation. Where do you feel it? You feel it in your body. You feel it in your nervous system. From that sensation, then you create an emotion. I'm going to show you how that happens. And then from there, you have a perception, and it comes through your senses, either your smell, sight, touch, whatever your five senses are, it'll come through there. So in this brain here, you have this autonomic nervous system that's reacting to the environment. Now, some of us are more sympathetic. Some of us are more parasympathetic. That is to say that some of us are more excitable. We all know, friends of ours and stuff like that. Some people are more emotional than others, right? And there are others of us who are more parasympathetic. And even within one family, okay, where genes are shared, you may find one brother who's bouncing off the walls, sympathetic, and another brother who you can put a bomb under him and he don't care. It's more parasympathetic. So that's an important point to know about yourself. Am I on the sympathetic, reactive, excitable type, or am I the parasympathetic, laid back, cool back, you know, no hassle kind of person? I know for myself, I'm more this than I am this. Okay? So knowing that is important because how you react to things is really important. And basically the idea, if you can come away with this idea, is it's not what happens to you in life, right? You know, sometimes people blame an event or they blame another person for how they reacted. No. It's how you react is part of this. So it's not what happens to you. It's not what happened with that person. It's how you reacted to that person. So it's not the event that happened, because good things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people. Everybody gets a share of this. But how I react, in other words, how I can regulate my emotions, that's really the key. Because when I've been working here for 28 years with lawyers, and what I see is, and when I read these disciplinary cases that they have for lawyers, I can tell you that 80% of these cases, they're not mistakes of intellect, they're mistakes of emotion. They're emotional mistakes. The emotions, okay, got hijacked. All right, so now the hypothalamus, one of the things about the hypothalamus is you've all heard of the pituitary gland, and there's something there called glucocorticoids, and this is about stress. So if you're a person that's excitable, you'll tend to secrete more cortisol. According to one of our great scientists, Robert Sapolsky, 90% of what we die from is going to be a stress-related illness, okay? Cancer, we know the connection between that and stress. So almost everything is stress. And it's all because too much cortisol is going into the system, and it's the worst thing that you can secrete. So if you're a person who's reactive and you're a person who, you know, gets angry easily, all of these things are going to contribute, because every time you do that, whether you know it or not, you're going to be secreting this cortisol, which is deadly. All right, so now as we move up, we're moving up to this emotional brain. And there are certain animals that have emotions. Anybody here have a dog? Yeah, so you know they're emotional, okay? And as I always tell people, I said, you know, if you want to conduct a little experiment, what you do is you take your significant other and you take your dog and you put them in the trunk of your car and you drive around the block 4 times, and then you go and you open the trunk. Guess who's glad to see you? So dogs have emotions. Not all animals have emotions. We have emotions, okay? And they're on that level. But this part of the brain, also known as the limbic system, you might have heard that term. This limbic system, this is the emotion factory of the brain, okay? These are all the emotions here that you see: anger, you know, depression, boredom, frustration, low self-esteem, guilt, shame. And by the way, let's just make a point here between guilt and shame. If you do something wrong, there's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt means I did something wrong, I acknowledge that, okay? And shame is I'm all wrong. Big difference. Big difference in terms of how you see yourself. Whether you can say, I'm guilty of this, yes, I did that, or I'm just no good. Big difference, and it's a big theme in therapy and psychotherapy. All right, so feelings of worthlessness, anxiety, stress, all are going on in this emotional brain. And this emotional brain has many structures, but the two we're going to focus on is the amygdala. And the amygdala is a Greek word for almond. You actually have two, one on each side of the brain here. And this is your Sloman alarm system. This is your fight or flight. Okay, so anything that comes into your environment that's threatening, okay, you get a memo from the boss, your work is terrible, okay, if it doesn't improve in 1 week, all right, I'll have to terminate you. And the brain starts seeing this as a threat. It's not like when we were cavemen and it was a saber-toothed tiger that was out after us. That was the threat. But now, look where we've come. Now it's a memo. And then the person starts thinking about Marge, starts thinking about the kids, starts thinking about the job, the car payments, the mortgage payments. Oh no, all that fear, okay? This is the place. This is the fight or flight place. Something else it is. It's the warehouse for emotional experiences. So emotionally, if something happens to you, either it could be something good or it could be something bad or even something traumatic. But this is where it gets registered. And not all emotional experiences get registered here in the amygdala, in this warehouse, but the very strong emotional experiences that you have in life, the very positive emotional experiences get registered in there, and the very negative experiences get registered in there. And this is what we know about these, that with respect to the positive experiences, they tend to come off, let's say like an egg off a Teflon pan. But the bad experiences, okay, tend to stick, okay? What's that substance that you get two pieces of cloth or so you stick them together? Velcro. So the bad experiences tend to stick like Velcro. And so while those good experiences will slough off after a while, the bad experiences may need, okay, someone to go to counseling, to go to therapy, to try to uncover all this stuff. Now, why? Because it's below consciousness. You're not even aware of it. That's why you need professional help to be able to get to those things and bring them up here to consciousness. Now, this line is very important. Above the line consciousness, below the line unconsciousness. To bring it up here to consciousness, now you see it. Now I remember that traumatic incident. I remember traumatic incident when my mother, went away for quite a while to an institution. And I was a young kid, and I said, "Where's my mom?" And everybody said, "She went to visit relatives." And I couldn't understand that. I just didn't understand it at all. So when she came back, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to approach her, not approach her. I didn't know if she was going to leave again or not. All this stuff caused. So that was a trauma. That was a trauma for me when I was young. But people have different traumas. And by the way, you can have a big T trauma, which is something that, you're at a shooting, you're right there, a spectator, your brother gets shot, or drive by, whatever it is, those kinds of things. Or you can have small T's. Small T's where your parents ignored you, they didn't really care for you, they didn't hug you enough. Those are small T's. But they're both important. And they both may need professional help to be able to address them. Because you're going through this world now with these unconscious traumatic memories, okay? And they're dictating how you think, feel, and act, but you're not aware of it. Right? Okay, so this is another structure here. And by the way, this amygdala has, for different people, it's got a different sensitivity level. All right? You may be interested to know that the amygdalas in studies with psychopaths, If you want to know what a psychopath is, just turn on Netflix. Everything is about psychopath. Gilgo Beach guy. So interesting that the research has revealed that psychopaths have a smaller amygdala. That is less sensitivity to what's going on out there. They're less reactive. Right? I can remember having a client. There was a double shotgun murder in Jersey City, and the first thing he says to me, he said, "I want to take a polygraph." I said, "You realize that if you take a polygraph, then you fail it, then they can use that against you, you know, when they present the case." He goes, "I want to take a polygraph." He takes the polygraph. He passes it. I know he's guilty of sin. I've seen the discovery. Okay. And so these folks here, they don't register empathy. They don't register sensitivity, right? They don't even register galvanic skin response. That's sweating of palms and all that stuff when they hook you up to the polygraph. They don't have any of that. They're cold on this emotional level. All right, remember, now this is in the emotional part of the brain, the limbic system, the amygdala. All right, so now something happens in your environment and you have a certain sensitivity. Let's say you have a, what's that story? Henny Penny, what's the other story that's just like Henny Penny? Where the sky is falling, the sky, right? Okay, so let's say you have that kind of a personality. Everything is, oh my God. And by the way, one of the things that you have to try to, I learned this from a client of mine who was in recovery, he's having a rough time. And then I didn't hear from him. He moved. I didn't hear from him for about 3 years. And he calls me up one day and I said, "Oh, John, how you doing?" He says, "I've got 3 years of recovery." I said, "Wow." I said, what do you attribute that to? What was the difference between when you couldn't and recover and your recovery now? He says, I finally was able to distinguish between ants and elephants. What's a big thing? What's a small thing? What's small potatoes? What are big potatoes? You have to have that sign, the clinical psychologists call it proportionality. This is not a big thing. I'm not going to get involved in that. I don't care. This is something that I should pay attention to, right? But again, the sensitive, emotional person doesn't have a very good sense of that proportionality of emotion. Everything is responded to in the same way. So again, regulating emotions is a very important part of having a successful life. And when the emotions can hijack, and we're going to talk about this because this is the part of the brain that the emotions hijack. Why? Because emotions are much more powerful. Okay, emotions are much more ancient, much more powerful than the thinking brain. You ever have a situation where somebody says, "Why'd you do that?" And you say, "I thought it was a good plan at the time," right? Or you think back on something that you did and you say, "Why did I do that? That wasn't a good thing for me to do." But it's because of the power of these emotions. And so as I move up to this part, I'd like you to see this as this part of the brain is the elephant. This part of the brain is the rider. And everything will be fine between the elephant and the rider when things are okay. But if something spooks that elephant, that rider's not going to be able to do much to control that elephant. You see? So again, if we pit this thinking brain against this emotional brain has the ability to hijack you emotionally, right? And a lot of drug use and other things that, for example, someone is trying to get better from alcohol abuse and they know it's not good for me to drink because every time I drink, there's a problem. So this part of the brain knows that, clear about that. But this part of the brain, all of a sudden there's a stressor in the life, right? And all of a sudden the person starts thinking emotionally about, you know what would help me relieve this stressor right now? A drink. And then this has all of a sudden hijacked this. The other structure that's important here is the hippocampus. And the hippocampus, that's also the seahorse. That's a Greek word for seahorse. That's what it looks like. But this is involved in memory. Short-term memory, long-term memory. In other words, things that happened to you a long time ago, things that have happened to you more recently. And so what happens when something happens in your environment, triggers the fight or flight, right? All hands on deck, all hands on deck. Henny Penny is going, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And what happens is that it relays this information to the hippocampus. You can think of the hippocampus as a card file, at least in my day, I'm an OG. So they had these card files that you look through for telephone numbers and stuff like that. So you flip through, you flip through the card file here and you see, and all of a sudden the hippocampus says, oh, here's something like this that happened before that you're encountering now. No, that's not it. Oh, no, that's not it either. And all of a sudden the hippocampus relays back to the amygdala. Okay, all hands below deck. There's nothing to worry about. And now the person is, the amygdala is starting to settle down, and the sympathetic nervous system that's pumping out all this cortisol during this stress situation is now also moving down. Okay, and it's moving back into a term that you've heard before, homeostasis. There's a balance here. Okay, so that's the emotional brain. Then we come up to the thinking brain. And this, again, this is more closer to this brain, which is against survival. So, for example, if you're walking along and there's some grass there, let's say you're at the beach, and all of a sudden there's a stick. It's about this long. And you look and you jump. Because what? Because this system over here, which is designed for your survival, says this could be a snake. And you look and you see, oh, it's just a stick. Okay, hippocampus says, just a stick, just a stick. And amygdala says, okay, we'll settle down. But you see how this is built into survival? So you react first to things. Your emotions come first. People think that your thinking comes first and then your emotions come. No, no. The new neuroscience tells us, okay, that first you have an emotion and then it's connected to a thought. And so now as we're moving up here to the thinking brain, this is what you've heard before, the executive center. This is where willpower is. And this is where logic, planning, abstraction, and this part of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex. And you can look at these two things another way. The prefrontal cortex is the brakes on this, which is the gas pedal. Okay, this is the accelerator. This is your only chance of decelerating is through this prefrontal cortex. But this one works much faster than this one. This one is lazier than this one. This one is designed to get you out of danger, so it's quick and dirty. It takes the back alley if it has to, but this one has to think about it, deliberate a little bit, and then talk down and try to calm this thing down. Well, there are some situations in life when you don't have the luxury of that time. At least this brain doesn't have the luxury of that time, okay, to be able to think through the thing. And it's reacting to this, okay? So two systems here. This one, quick and dirty, fast, okay? This one, slower, more deliberate, okay? But not so keyed into survival as this one is. And so that's what we have a lot of time. A lot of time people get taken for emotional hijacks. Again, why? Because maybe they have more sensitive amygdalas, maybe their autonomic nervous system is more sympathetic and excitable, right? And again, knowing these things about oneself, and by the way, it's no good to know something. It's almost you have to create or work on developing so much self-awareness, okay? Like, there's one brother-in-law of mine that I have developed such self-awareness that as soon as he comes or he's in sight, okay, I know this could potentially go south, okay? So I'm aware of that, because if I'm not aware of that, then when some interaction happens between us, in 2 seconds, it could go south. And all of a sudden, this is clicking like crazy. And I'm functioning from what's called a reactive mind. So Nancy and I teach a course on difficult clients, difficult adversaries, and difficult judges. And one of the things that we stress throughout the entire course is to be responsive, not reactive. Don't react, okay? So knowing that my brother's coming along, already I'm trying to get into this centered, self-aware place where I know that anything's possible here. And it helps because you know why? If I don't develop that awareness, too late. Too late. It's already started. The emotions are going to take both of us for a ride, okay? And some horrible things might happen. I've studied Buddhism for about 18 years. And one of the little stories about the Buddha is he's walking along and the guy sees him and he says, "Oh, are you the Buddha?" He says, "Yes, I am." He says, "What is the afterlife like?" And the Buddha says, "How do I know? I'm not dead." Okay? He said, and then the Buddha says, "I teach two things: the arising of reactivity and the cessation of reactivity. That's the only two things I teach," he said. So being aware of your environment and the things that can tend to trigger, or being aware of your stressors. And by the way, your stressors are different from my stressors, different from James' stressors. Everybody's stressors are different. The key is to know what your stresses are. It doesn't really matter what Ray Ortiz's stresses are. It's for you to determine what your stresses are, right? And to walk around and when you encounter this amygdala making even a faint sound, you know, okay, this could be a possible problem. For some people, I'm working with on Laura now with road rage. This gets triggered easily. Developing self-awareness now, from the minute he gets into his car now, he's a little different because he's functioning from a different place. He's functioning from a place of awareness. The story about people playing football in Central Park, touch football, and all of a sudden one of the guys who's playing says to the other guys, he said, "You guys hear that?" And they go, "No." He goes, "Yeah, it's coming from over there." They look, they don't see anything. All of a sudden, in a minute, there's a helicopter. And what happened? The guy who said that, he was a medic in Vietnam, and he developed a sense of he had to know where the helicopters were coming from, how long they were going to take to get there, okay? But the other people didn't have that sense. So it's too late, okay, when the helicopter is already over you. It's too late. You got to see it coming so that you can start to get centered, okay, and have a positive reactivity to something rather than a negative reactivity. And you go either way on it, right? So moving up here, the thinking brain, prefrontal cortex. Now, interesting thing about the prefrontal cortex and why, you know, young people, especially in the criminal justice system, they're behind the 8 ball in the sense that the prefrontal cortex, which is the brakes on your emotions, that forms from the back. The brain forms from the back, the occipital area, all the way to the prefrontal. And they say that it takes even up to 25 years for that process to develop. So when you have these kids who are younger than that, okay, all they are is accelerators with no brakes. Think about when you were young and the risks you used to take and the things you used to do, right? Then you started to develop a little more better judgment, okay, and decision making, and that's here. That's why you see so many problems with teenagers. That's why you see, for example, girls at young ages are committing suicide because of internet stuff. Why? Because they didn't get enough likes. Emotional brain. They didn't get enough likes. Okay. Just had one in New Jersey, Rockaway Township, where it was a case of bullying. $9.1 million. They went from the, case of bullying. And they were bullying her on the internet and all this other stuff. But yeah, so emotionally, she couldn't take that. And again, different people have different levels of tolerance for life and what happens in life. But that's what happened with her. So here again, till 25, you really probably don't have good stuff regarding logic, abstraction, and planning, right? And matter of fact, it was always interesting to know that before you could rent a car, how old did you have to be? No, 25, 25. And this is years ago. These guys are way ahead of the science, you know, these rent-a-car places. And so, you know, when mom says, Tommy, this is the third car you've wrecked in the last 5 months. And Tommy can actually say, well, mom, neuroscientifically, okay, I only have half a brain. That's true. It hasn't fully developed yet, you see? So this is your chance to do something about this, but knowing how you are is important. Give you a little different model of this. How are we doing on time, James? 2 minutes? Oh, okay. So no, we're just about right. I was gonna have all this other marvelous stuff, but what are you gonna do? Okay. So any questions or any thoughts that have come up for you, or you know, any new knowledge that you've learned this time, anything that might be able to help you? See, when I'm at family reunions and all this other stuff, I'm looking at everybody through this chart. Okay, we're gonna get a load of this guy's amygdala. You know what I mean? Okay, this one has no hippocampus. Don't you remember what happened last time you did that? Okay, and so that's where I look at these things. But it's been invaluable to me as an individual to know this stuff and how my brain works. And I'm much more aware when I'm walking through my day, how I'm moving through the world, okay, in this brain, in this Ray Ortiz brain, okay? Because all kinds of things, during the course of a given day, how many things can come at you, right? How many stressors can come up? How many of these things come up? But again, having that centered approach to it, because you know, okay, he's triggering my amygdala at this particular point, okay? Or I know that I can tampen down that amygdala by using my thinking brain to slow it down and really consider the possibilities, okay, much more closely than just reacting to it, right? One attorney that I was working with, the alcohol problems, he said, it's like, I don't know. He says, I don't know. It's like when the doctor hits you on the knee right here, and what happens? It's a reflex. He goes, something happens, something goes wrong, and it's like the doctor hitting me there. Boom, I just run for a drink. Reactive, you know, not thinking through. Anybody, anything? Anything at all? Anything that went through your mind as you... This here? Oh, LTF is, that's a good one, good question. That's a key. Some people have low tolerance for frustration. Others have HTF, high tolerance for frustration, okay? And again, you can see the implications on an emotional level, okay? If you're easily to frustrate and you don't have what they call, what the clinical psychologists call resilience, you know, or grit or bounce back, okay, then if you have low tolerance for frustration, it's going to be a problem, because a lot of this world and a lot of life is frustration. And getting beyond that is really what's going to make the difference, whether you sit in the frustration, get anger around the frustration, okay, start to blame others around the frustration, rather than trying to work on developing a high tolerance for frustration rather than a low tolerance for frustration. And basically the idea is, I don't care what anybody says or does, you know. I know myself, and this is all part of becoming aware of self. I know myself, I know what's good for me, okay? I may not have known when I was younger, but I have a better idea now, okay? And I wanna move slower through the world and be more deliberate about things rather than being reactive about things, okay? So again, if you have any questions, you wanna come up and see us to talk about anything, we're here, you know. If there's a colleague, a co-worker that's having some issues, just go up and talk, see what see what they think about it and stuff. And then, we'll give suggestions on how you can work on some of this stuff. All right? Okay. Now you can get your brains out of here and go home. Remember road rage. Okay. Okay.